Another thing I want to talk about here, John, is Bruce Arians again giving more insight. This time, it was the running back battle. Ronald Jones versus Leonard Fournette. Again, you guys wrote an article about it on pewterreport.com. We're going to be talking about, these couple of guys specifically, because we are going to mention probably some of the other running backs here in another video. But talking about Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, and Bruce Arians and his thoughts on that, kind of explain what went down in that kind of conversation, what Bruce Arians was talking about there.
I think he really likes all of them, but that's not that surprising because Arians kind of likes all of his players usually and is pretty effusive in his praise of them, especially before the season. I think the struggle for him is going to be figuring out how to deploy them. He thinks that they all can play, but there's a reality that hasn't gone away for a couple of years now that Ronald Jones kills you in the passing game. Protection, not knowing where he's supposed to be as a receiver, not getting his head around, not getting his hands up. It was such a big issue last year. You could say 5, 6, 7 drops, whatever, but double that for the amount of pass plays that just went to waste because he doesn't know where to be or his timing or getting his head around or getting his hands up. And his coaches have been on it. He doesn't know when to get his hands up. He doesn't get his hands up quick enough to get the ball. He doesn't find the ball. We're talking about easy, simple, routine stuff, and he has not been able to master it 3 years in. He's the most talented runner on the team, but that's concerning, and it makes you not want to commit to him. And I think you've seen that with Arians. He doesn't, he and Fournette are going to battle it out, and Giovani Bernard's going to have this big third down, passing downs, 2-minute situation, end of game situation impact, and you're going to have to, take that for what it is and how that's going to affect the other guys, especially Fournette probably in those situations. So I very much think it's going to be a committee backfield. I very much think 3 guys will play where they might have envisioned 3 guys playing last year, and it just didn't work out with LaShawn McCoy or Keshawn Vaughn. This year, I think it's very much going to work out. I wonder if by the end of the year, they just get so frustrated with Fournette and Rojo's inconsistencies and how steady Giovani Bernard is that they just end up going with Bernard more often than not, because toward the end of the year, Arians tends to just be like, I'm a passing guy. And last year in the playoffs, they really did run it a good bit, and they felt like that was a way that they could be successful, and the results were kind of mixed on that. But I wondered if that might have been another sign that Leftwich kind of taking over could result in some shifting there. We'll see. I think that's going to be one of the big question marks, though, because if they are still this pass heavy, which I think they absolutely should be, and I can't imagine with all the receiving talent that they wouldn't be. But if that's their approach, then I think Giovani Bernard's going to play a lot more than people think, because it's really not going to be the end of the world how many yards they get on each rushing down. It's going to be about protecting Brady, keeping him clean, giving him an outlet, picking up yards after the catch as a receiver. Those things are just way more valuable in any offense, but I think especially in this offense, and Bernard's brought those throughout his entire career. He's been consistent, one of the few guys who's consistent in terms of his hands, in terms of his pass protection in the league at that position. It's a lot of value for any team, but it might be even more value for the Bucs than any other team.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. We actually did a poll here on the community tab on the YouTube channel where I asked the question, who do you think is going to get the majority of running back snaps, during the regular season or by the regular season? And, I guess somewhat surprisingly, Ronald Jones took the poll and, just dominated it in terms of percentages. I believe he had almost half of the votes. So it was really interesting to see. Then obviously Leonard Fournette got second. I believe Giovani Bernard got third, and then Keshawn Vaughn got fourth, or maybe swap Bernard and Vaughn. But the point is that still a lot of people believe in Ronald Jones and saying hey, he's a good running back. He can do the things that he needs to do as a runner. He would have had 1,000 yards last year had it not been for, injury concerns and things along those lines. So a lot of people still have faith in Ronald Jones, but you make a good point where it's hey, receiving thing, we've seen it time and time again, Fournette and Jones, they're both meh. It's the best way to describe it.
Right.
And neither one is really doing better than the other. They're both very similar in terms of their receiving ability. Enter Giovani Bernard, and now you're whoa. This is going to be very, very interesting. I even have a friend of mine, is Billy. He has a YouTube channel, O and the C here on YouTube, and he was so excited about the Giovani Bernard signing, where he made a comment that it said, Giovani Bernard could very well be one of the most, if not the most important weapon on this entire Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense when everything's said and done. And, that could be a legitimate thing depending on what happens here with the offense and what they want to do, exactly what you said. I mean, Tom Brady loves himself a good receiving back, and now he's got a guy who's really been slept on in a lot of ways, with Giovani Bernard. He's been on some Bengals teams that have been very mediocre, and now he's coming to the Super Bowl champions. Like, we could see a storyline where it's like, hey, Giovani Bernard's been great, and everybody's kind of like knew that, but now he just gets more highlighted now that he's on, the defending Super Bowl champions,
Right. Oh, absolutely. And so I think you're exactly right in saying that if Rojo, and I think the poll's right, if Rojo isn't beating himself, then he's going to be the best running back on the team. And so he should get the most opportunities. And honestly, James, Leonard Fournette shouldn't play, like, if that's the case. And because Ronald Jones is definitely better as a running back than Leonard Fournette. And if he's not going to kill you in the pass game, or you can find a way around it with Giovani Bernard, Leonard, to me, is the guy without a role. The only question is, the only reason Leonard was playing last year over Ronald Jones wasn't because necessarily of anything Leonard did. It was just because of what he didn't do. He wasn't quite as bad as Rojo in terms of consistency. They just didn't want to run that risk in the playoffs. I mean, they just wanted the more reliable guy. So they put him in there, and they also got his best play. So, I mean, I'm not saying Leonard Fournette's, a chump, but he is not as talented as Ronald Jones as a runner. So if Jones is going to be consistent, if he can improve in pass protection, I mean, Fournette was not great in pass protection either last year. He dropped plenty of passes himself, a little more awareness of what to do in space, how to move away from, linebackers and zones and find space. I mean, that's clear with him, right? That fourth down catch Fournette made before the Scotty Miller touchdown against Green Bay was a really great play by him. And that's one that Ronald Jones, in my opinion, does not make. So it's those little things. People say, oh, they both had drops. They both blew it in pass protection. True. But Fournette did do some little things, some intricacies to what he did in the passing game that were superior to what Ronald Jones would have done on the field in the same situation based on what we've seen. So that's the key for Rojo, man. Like, people are absolutely right. He's the most talented back on the team. I hope that if he is ready to rock and roll, and there's no ups and downs and all these crazy peaks and valleys with him, then yes, he should play a lot. Giovani Bernard should be the complimentary back. Leonard Fournette should be the goal line, seldomly used, change of pace, break in case of emergency, type of running back as the number 3 guy. Because, I don't think there's anything he's better at if Rojo's not beating the team, beating himself, and Gio's healthy, that he's not better at anything than those guys. He would take a backseat in all areas of running back play to those guys.
Yeah, and that's what's going to be so interesting to pay attention to. Because like you said, like, Rojo's the better runner, but technically Leonard Fournette does maybe like one or two minor things better in the receiving game, But now with Giovani Bernard there, that kind of takes away that leverage that Leonard Fournette would have in a battle against Ronald Jones. And paying attention to OTAs and training camp and things along those lines. I mean, this is going to be a very important battle to keep an eye on, because, like you said, whichever guy loses that battle between Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette for that top running back spot, there's a realistic chance where they might not see a lot of playing time. Point blank. We even saw it with Leonard Fournette last year. I mean, the man was almost cut, because of just being upset about the situation he was in. Bruce Arians was like, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but you got to buy into this, and we all know what happened with that situation. Leonard Fournette bought in, had some phenomenal football in the playoffs. So, this is going to be interesting, guys, because whichever guy loses that battle between Ronald Jones, between Leonard Fournette, might not see a lot of playing time. So
especially if he loses it significantly, right? Like if it's pretty decisive, you don't need to split that role. I'm fine with the backfield by committee, but 2 guys can be the committee too. And you know what you're getting from Giovani Bernard. That's the nice thing. Last year, we didn't know we were getting from anybody on a given Sunday. We just didn't know at the running back position. Now, especially in the most important areas of the field, pass protection and receiving, that's the most important things for a running back, most distinguishable things for a running back. Most guys can run the ball. Those things really distinguish guys. Now, I think what you're getting in some key situational play. That's helpful for sure. The other part of it, though, is that if one guy really proves themselves as the better back, or one guy falls apart, thinking that's more likely Rojo. But I mean, Fournette's had his little I deserve better than this type of moments too. And you hope maybe he's grown and matured past that, but maybe not. Also, he's a prideful dude, and he may see the situation differently than the coaches do. So, I think that how that battle meets itself out, you're absolutely right. By the end of the year, I mean, if Keyshawn Vaughn's improving, it's not crazy to say we could see movement with one of those guys. If a team loses a couple backs and needs somebody, Seattle loses a couple backs and is down, that we already know they were interested in Leonard Fournette. They're the kind of team that would absolutely trade for a running back in the middle of the season. They draft him in the first round and, all that kind of stuff. So they would make that kind of a move, I think. So, it would be a late pick, but that's the kind of thing that could happen if the job goes decisively one way. If both guys are kind of what they've been, Leonard's just kind of a guy and not necessarily who he was in a couple great postseason runs, and Rojo is kind of just this up and down guy still. They probably want to keep both and keep as many bodies as you can, and whoever's hot on a given week, try to play that guy, and that might be how they handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what we saw last year, Ryan with the hot hand, which whatever works kind of mentality, like that could also be another option.